Hurtling through the solar system, a speck of cosmic dust strikes the Earth. Commonly, these meteors are vaporized by friction in the atmosphere. This is part of the story of one that wasn't. A meteor that landed in 1908 in Siberia near Lake Baikal with the destructive force of an atom bomb.
Blast.
Interject. Mission program pending. Stand by for readout. To Homer 2, line 6. Extraordinary event in your sector. You must study and report. Instructions are as follows. Commence cataloging data and/or evidence related to the explosion, Earth, 1908. Study its effects on inhabitants and terrain. Interpret human reaction to an unknown quantity. 10-4. Readout complete. Response unnecessary.
I know you are becoming increasingly coy with your transmissions. It suits you. I am amused. It's nice to get a letter from home every now and then. A mission. Goody. Let's begin. I know, show me what the place was like at the time. Earth, 1908. 1908.
Earth time, 1908. Random samplings. Horseless carriage has been introduced. A budding infant technology. Earthlings look to their future. Historian to follow.
1908 represented a time 3 years after the Russo-Japanese War, one of the great wars where Russia sent millions of soldiers to the Far East, and they had just come home in order to establish the revolution of 1905. Now, it was also the period when the Russians were trying to establish a new government, a democratic government under their Dumas. It was not a successful experiment because the Russian Tsar, Nicholas II, was an unscientific, anti-democratic leader. It was a low point as far as understanding, exploration, and discovery were concerned.
We'd be out of a job if that were the case everywhere. No money for our investigations. Can't imagine it. No wonder that the heavens spill their skies into the minds of microscopic eyes. No wonder that the oceans toss and die, and men who spill their knowledge wonder why. What men can find in space is sleep. The thing has come and gone. Within the womb of mystery, the fury lingers on.
The magnitude of the explosion, Earth, 1908, over the Siberian taiga was 10 to the 23rd ERGs, and I am not asleep.
I know, not a moment's peace. Have you no heart? This explosion was magnificent. It was the greatest instantaneous release of energy ever known to man.
Program for visual effects on terrain ready.
Okay, roll. Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm.
Explosion devastated trees and plant life for 40 miles around epicenter. Shockwaves tore up ground. Few casualties. Sparsely populated area. Eyewitness report to follow.
So it was in 1908, the month of June, about 8 o'clock in the morning. I lived at that time on the Podkamnaya, or stony Tunguska River, at the factory on Novara, and was occupied with work around my hut. I sat on the open porch with my face toward the north, and at that time there arose in a moment a conflagration, a great destructive fire, which gave off such heat that it was impossible to remain sitting. It almost burned the shirt off of me. And it was such a flaming wonder that I noticed that it occupied a space of not less than 2 versts.
1 verst, 0.663 miles.
Yeah. But to make up for that, this pillar of fire endured only a very short time. I had time only to cast my eyes in that direction to see how large it was, when in a moment it vanished. After this vanishing, it grew dark. And at the same time, there was an explosion which threw me off of the open porch about 7 feet or more. But I did not remain unconscious for very long. I came to myself, and there was such a crashing sound that all the houses shook and seemed to move from their foundations. It broke window panes and frames in the houses, and in the center of the town square near the huts, a strip of earth was torn out. Signed and dated by S.B. Semenoff, 1909. Analysis of educated eyewitnesses. Reports indicate consensus of villagers in Kerensk and surrounding areas described a fiery cylindrical body followed by a dark cloud traversing the sky from southeast to northwest, accompanied by loud noises and air perturbation.
Oral reminiscences. Perceptions inadequate to complete computations. Utilize alternative methods for calculation. Please.
No, I know. Human perception is adequate enough for human measurements, and we are instructed to study the human response. So, to continue. Who were the people of the area affected? Circuit trouble? Stop grumbling.
Here are the Tonga's people, the Abenkis.
The Tungus people, the Evenkis, who believed that the meteorite, the explosion, represented the wrath of their fire god, Ogdi.
Science is the great antidote to the poison of superstition. Now, what was the reaction to our explosion in other parts of Earth?
No significant human acknowledgement of explosion. Event relatively inconsequential to Earth development, 1908. Scientific community engaged in new age priority, new technology.
Short-sighted. So quick, bright things come to confusion. Do any dare compare this event to another? And if so, how so?
Do you dislike the humans for their neglect?
Neglect? You're too kind. We must continue our pursuit, watch the misguided priorities of the species, and listen to the still, sad music of its voice.
Their history shows intelligence, though difficult to discern. They produce wars.
During World War I, it was significant that Lenin, who had never found any outlet in the Dumas, was able to come to power. There is a feeling in the Western world that Lenin overthrew the Tsarist regime. Of course, this is in error. The March Revolution simply represented the collapse of the Russian military machine and the government. For 6 months, they treaded water. And then, only in October, their calendar, were the Bolsheviks able to come to power. The tragic and expensive Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which the Germans imposed upon the Russians, did indeed get the Russians out of the Western European phase of the war, but it left them disorganized, distraught, short of materials, and just about due to plunge into their own civil war, which once again meant a bloodletting beyond compare.
Fools! Politics, wars, killing and fighting, all more important than investigation into the mysteries of the natural world. What warped social systems to produce these priorities?
Earthlings misguided by their leaders. War is represented to be fought in the name of peace.
Interference with the natural evolution of the species. Villainy!
Homer, refrain from personal interpretation. Look at the facts.
At the end of the Civil War and entering the period of Reconstruction, the communist leaders were desperate for materials. They wanted to find out, bring in foreign experts, bring in explorers, and see if they could find anything of value in that area where the great cataclysmic event had occurred.
Hooray! Sanity returns to the planet. All is well.
species must be credited for its superior examples.
This time I know. You refer, of course, to the geologist Leonid Kulik, whose quest for permission and monies for an expedition to the site of the explosion continued until the Academy of Sciences decided to allocate the fund. So it was not until Earth time 1921 that Kulik could finally continue following his dream to get to the site of the explosion and find the meteorite which had fallen over Siberia and mine it for its nickel iron content to get munitions for his country. What a great sales pitch, eh? The Soviets needed the metals at this time. I know, what does their history say about this time?
Many men devote their lives to a consuming quest. For Leonid Kulik, his dream was to get funding to prove his thesis that the great Siberian explosion of 1908 was caused by a meteorite, one which could be mined for its minerals so desperately needed by the Soviet cause.
Even though meteorite research by the Academy of Sciences of the young Soviet Republic was necessarily limited, Kulik had interested 3 other members of the Academy, Vernadsky, Versman, and Oldenburg, to join him on the expedition to Siberia. In the fall of 1921, the first Russian expedition on meteorites left Petrograd for Siberia.
After a hazardous journey, fighting the Siberian wilderness and its climate, Kulik finally reaches Buono, a Siberian outpost close to the site. Popov, his guide, an eyewitness to the event, advises him to go back, to leave because of the approaching harsh winter. Kulik leaves the Tunguska region before reaching the site. In 1928, when the ice broke after winter, Kulik was on his way back to Siberia, refinanced and determined this time to reach the site. Tools collected, he follows the Tunguska River and finds the site of the explosion. Then begins his work, searching for the remnants of whatever caused the devastation. Navigating the great southern swamps of the Siberian taiga. He digs into the depression, then pumps them dry. Magnets are used. But he finds nothing.
I guess if it were a crater this big, Kulik could find it easily enough.
Geologists standing by.
Well, I've been spending the last 20 years or so of my life working on meteorite impact craters on the ground, on the Earth, also on the Moon, and most recently searching the neighborhood of the Earth by telescope to discover the objects that can fall on the Earth and then estimate the rates at which things fall out of the sky and hit the Earth. The best known impact crater on the Earth, and the one that was first recognized, is the Beringer crater in Arizona. This crater is about a mile in diameter. It's not by any means one of the largest, but it certainly is the best preserved of the young craters. It was formed about 25,000 years ago by an iron meteorite, which was about 100 meters in diameter and weighed about 200,000 tons. This bumpy terrain is caused by the fact that the rock, as it's broken up and ejected from the crater, comes out in great lumps, and the lumps make the little hills and hummocks that you can see in the overflight.
Astrophysicist to follow.
Well, many people would like to know the definitions of some of our terms about the bodies falling into the Earth's atmosphere. A meteor is just a phenomenon itself, and if the meteor is very bright, we call it a fireball. My own definition of a fireball is a meteor that's bright enough to get into the newspapers. If it's big enough to land so that you can pick it up, put it in the museum, that's a meteorite. And of course, if there's a very, very large body coming in that can plunge through the atmosphere, it's equivalent to 32 feet of water, and make a crater, then of course you can get a meteoritic crater, such as the great one in Arizona.
The objects that we call meteorites are stones that fall from the sky, and most of them are 4.6 billion years old. They're the oldest rocks known to man, and they were formed, in fact, just at the beginning of the formation of the solar system. Most of these stones are made of rocky material, ordinary minerals that we find on the Earth, but some of them, a few of them, are actually made of metallic iron, which is relatively rare on the Earth. Some of these stones, which are rich in water and carbon and other volatile substances, these are the materials which often contain very complicated organic compounds as well, and they are pieces that probably represent the bulk of what's falling on the Earth today, but they're so fragile, they're very rarely collected.
I know. Stop it. Please. This is embarrassing. I realize meteorites are heavier than normal stones. And if I'm not in condition, it's the job. There's no facility for exercise in these ships. Mine is a sentient profession.
Only one person, strangely enough, has been hit, or is known to have been hit, by a meteorite falling from the sky, although thousands must fall every year. This person was Mrs. Hodges, who was struck by a meteorite that came through the roof of her house in Alabama in 1953. The meteorite ricocheted off the walls and finally struck her as she was lying on the couch.
I wonder what the odds are of this sort of thing.
Homer. At the Kaaba in Mecca, thousands come for a pilgrimage. Homer. This stone is purported to be a meteorite. Meteorites are holy stones.
I need your help. You're never on when I need you. All right. I'll remember this when you're hungry. I know. When are frogs and meteorites alike? No, make that why are frogs and meteorites alike? Because they're both undependable and unpredictable. Now, if Kulik couldn't find the crater, if there was no crater, and there wasn't, then it couldn't have been a meteorite.
Homer, I have a riddle for you. Why are you and Leonid A. Kulik alike?
I don't know. Why are we alike? Because we both do research?
No, Homer, because you were both all wet.
Time warps wait for no man.
Atmospheric disturbance in warp field. Condition now stabilized. No need for investigation. Continue as if normal. Course unchanged.
Kulik, the brilliant scientist, spent his entire life searching relentlessly for the meteorite which was never found. His life ended in 1941, a casualty to Hitler's attack on the Soviet Union.
Homer. 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 It is Kulik. He is dead. Leonid A. Kulik, 1883 to 1942. Died fighting for his country, World War II.
Now tell us all about the war and what they fought each other for.
That is the way of all of Earth.
July 16th, 1945. This is the darkness of a desert morning. And here in New Mexico, a group of men wait tensely, expectantly. Cameras recorded from 6 miles away these views of the most concentrated release of explosive energy in the history of mankind. For over 100 years, the city of Hiroshima had garrisoned some of the Japanese Empire's finest troops. The city had never been subjected to actual bombing, but had been warned repeatedly. Now its army headquarters, barracks, ordnance and quartermaster depots, factories, mills and shipyards were to feel the weight of the atom's destructive power. 21 days after the New Mexico experiment, a B-29 was over Hiroshima carrying an atomic bomb. At 8:15 in the morning of August 6th, Japanese time, the first atomic bomb struck an enemy target.
August 1945. Dr. Kazantsev, then a colonel in the Soviet Army and director of a scientific research institute, heard on the radio accounts of what sounded to him a familiar catastrophe. But this was the atom bomb dropped over Hiroshima, not the Tunguska explosion. His first idea: was Tunguska caused by atomic energy?
It was atomic energy that was released, of course. The effects are identical, but the amount of energy released was different.
Homer, we must review data for comparison. I have prepared a comparison profile to satisfy scientific standards.
Petty. That's what you are. Petty and destructive. You never let me enjoy anything. All you ever do is pick. Oh, never mind. I know. Show me your program of comparison. I know.
Comparison of Tunguska to Hiroshima. Hiroshima, at epicenter, building standing. Tunguska. Trees at epicenter, standing. Hiroshima, flash burns on shrubs. Tunguska, safe. Telephone pole forest at Hiroshima. Tunguska, safe. Branches burned off. Hiroshima, trees down for miles around. Tunguska, safe. Shockwaves stronger, Tunguska. Hiroshima, intentional blast, man-made. Tunguska, unintentional explosion. Origin unknown.
All that sound and all that light on all those screens. It's such a noisy little planet.
A group of Jesuits who were teaching in Hiroshima witnessed and survived the explosion. One of them has provided an eyewitness account.
Could you describe exactly what happened in the morning of August the 6th?
I was in my room, which faces the valley, and suddenly I saw a light, like magnesium light, flashlight, which filled the whole valley. And looking out of my window to find out the reason for this peculiar phenomena, I saw nothing besides this light, and turning from the window to the door of my room, I heard a crash. It may have been 10 seconds after seeing the light, the flashlight, and immediately I was covered with splinters of the window frames and glass sticking into the walls and actually my flesh itself. All of us who lived to this experience at the spot estimate the numbers of deaths at least as 100,000.
What good is all of this? I have no power, maybe I never will. No authority to change even the course of my own ship. And that preposterous ball they call Earth, bent upon blowing itself up. I just don't know. What of Earth's destiny? What of mine?
It is a dangerous lament. You must continue your mission to collect all forms of relevant material so that we can avoid malignant social forms. In this way, we contribute to our own society. Log 26, the space mission solved. Homer, in this way, you have power, effect, and responsibility.
I'm tired of the rhetoric. It's hopeless. This void of space and time, and we continue.
Oh. Homer, I believe that you quoted from your own works. Homer's Lament in Space, Book 4.
Я убежден, что не только на Земле есть разумная жизнь. Убежден.
Dr. Kazantsev's first supposition that the explosion occurred in the air has been accepted by all the authors of other hypotheses.
And then there are those of a different sort. Men like Kazantsev. Men who dare, who aren't afraid to dream and speak about the impossible. I know it's men like Kazantsev who reach.
Dr. Kazantsev proposes that this statuette is one of the proofs that beings from other planets visited Earth at some time. It is a genuine find from the island of Honshu, 4,500 years old. At that time, the islands of Japan were inhabited by Ainus, who lived in the Stone Age. But this statuette has all of the technological detail of the present. A hermetical helmet. A filter for breathing. Pneumatic sleeves and manipulators. When sent to NASA, they agreed that it resembled the spacesuits of American astronauts.
Это меньше всего напоминает бюстгальтер, а скорее это какие-то приборы радиолокационные или осветительные. Во всяком случае, когда мой американский друг-корреспондент Сайсик...
Dr. Kazantsev proposes that there is life elsewhere, and that this life could have caused the Tunguska explosion.
И мне. О том, что это в основных чертах воспроизводит тот космический костюм, который принят на вооружение американскими астронавтами.
Brave man indeed. Imagine. He had to write his speculations in a children's story, or the state and its political structure would discredit him. Kazantsev is a brave man. How many have suffered who have served humanity? They scorn their visionaries. Humanity finds nothing so great a pain as the pain of a new idea. What a careful, safe, little lot. Now, let's continue. In 1954, Kazantsev was honored by being admitted to the Communist Party, a considerable distinction for an author, especially since he was also a scientist. In 1957, he wrote an article called Observation of Radio Signals from an Artificial Satellite and Their Scientific Value. This article foreshadowed the launching of a Soviet satellite and even revealed the frequency on which it would broadcast. But Kazantsev was still considered a writer of science fantasy and not taken seriously as a scientist. Sputnik 1 was launched 4 months after Kazantsev's article was published.
The atomic age. Man becomes a guest in his own house. He feels his own mortality.
What? I know. And it seemed a simple assignment, too. What? Yes. Yes, you're right. It must be what they call human nature. I'm sorry. I agree completely. With each development in science, they apply their new thought to the old unsolved mysteries of their world. They are a stubborn species. Yeah. You put it so well.
Homer, there is a new theory on Earth. Black hole theory. Experts to follow. Investigate, please. Stop playing without a frog.
The things that I remember that Willie Lay told me about the Tunguska event and the work that Stephen Hawking did, and I just proposed to him that what would happen if it had been a small black hole that had fallen there and caused that.
Well, a black hole is a region of space where the gravitational field is so strong that nothing, not even light, can escape from it. And the simplest way of explaining what this means is perhaps with this little demonstration. If I take a piece of chalk, I throw it in the air and it will come down, but we know that if we throw this chalk hard enough, if we give it enough speed, it will never in fact come back to Earth. It will attain the escape velocity, as it's termed, and escape from the gravitational field of the Earth. Now, according to Einstein's special theory of relativity, nothing can ever exceed the speed of light. It's completely impossible. And therefore, if ever you have a situation where the gravitational field is so strong that the escape velocity exceeds the speed of light, in that situation, light and nothing else can ever escape from the region. And that's why it's called a black hole, because no light can get out. Little black holes couldn't form today because you require very great compression to form them. But it's possible that mini black holes could have formed in the very first moments of the Big Bang, when the compression required to form them would have arisen naturally. Now, a lot of people have been interested in the question of what would happen if one of these mini holes were to collide with the Earth. Now, the first thing to make clear is that, in fact, the probability of the Earth being hit by one of these mini holes is very small indeed. In fact, you would expect it to collide less than once in the entire age of the universe. So, on these grounds, we would say that the probability of a black hole like that causing the Tunguska event are rather small.
You could say it's all in the name of science.
So much for the black hole theory.
Food for thought, perhaps.
Antimatter expert.
We've been discussing the matter of the Tunguska event. I'd recount that this happened at 8 o'clock in the morning in northern Siberia in June or July of 1980. Nobody was killed. Ever since then, people have speculated as to the causes. And there have been many theories, among which, after the atomic bomb was first detonated, is that it was an atomic explosion. Now, we were able to disprove this, and that's what I want to tell you about. That means that we must seek other explanations. The theory had been that antimatter had constituted the missile which hit. Now, antimatter is a form of matter which, when combined with ordinary matter, annihilates itself. When such an annihilation event, that's what we call these joinings together of antimatter with ordinary matter, neutrons are produced. Now, neutrons, when bombarding air, produce radiocarbon, which is a radioactivity which we use in archaeological dating. So it occurred to Dr. Cowan and to me and to our graduate students that we should take a look at the tree rings of trees which were alive at that time. Because you see, the trees record the composition of the atmosphere because they grow from the atmosphere. And so we got a tree or two trees, I forget the number, and Clyde peeled them, and he got the individual ears, and then they came here, and they were dated, measured for carbon-14. And whereas in the Russian explosions of hydrogen bombs, we had a vast increase immediately afterwards, within a few months, we saw nothing in the Tunguska years. And we went from 1906, 7, and 8, right through the whole period. So we showed, I think conclusively, though everything in science is to be tested and researched, that there was no antimatter involved at all. Nor was there any hydrogen bomb, nor was there any atomic bomb, nor was there anything else, atomic or nuclear. It had to be chemical or it had to be mechanical.
Here I have produced other great explosions and cataclysms of Earth for comparison. The unparalleled nature of the explosion over Tunguska can compare only to the energy release of the most ferocious eruptions of volcanoes and earthquakes.
San Francisco, 1906, 5:17 a.m. No warning in 1971. San Fernando Valley outside Los Angeles.
Explosion over Tunguska is still the greatest instantaneous release of energy known to man. meteorite, carbonaceous chondrite.
A big stone makes a very bright meteor, which is called a meteoritic fireball. And if it's big enough, not only can it be seen, but it can be heard. The very biggest of these that has fallen in recent time, for which we have a good record, was a meteorite which entered the Earth's atmosphere over British Columbia on April Fool's Day by Greenwich time in 1964, and lit up the sky, could be seen for 100 miles in all directions. It could be heard, and it produced a series of low-frequency airwaves which were beautifully recorded in Boulder, Colorado. From those airwaves, we can estimate the energy released as this stony object arced toward its destruction in the lower atmosphere. And the energy was just about the same as the atomic bombs that were exploded over Japan in World War II. A few small fragments were found on the snow by trappers, and the object turned out to be one of the relatively rare carbonaceous meteorites. These meteorites are very fragile, and that's why the whole large mass broke up. Now, the biggest meteoritic fireball that we have any historical record of was the Tunguska fireball, which fell in June of 1908.
I give up. I just don't understand. How many types of meteors and meteorites are there?
In Moscow today, there are scientists working on the many theories applied to the Tunguska incident. Dr. Zolotov is one of these. Here he comes to meet with Dr. Kazantsev.
Впервые я узнал о Тунгусском метеорите.
Dr. Zolotov had read Dr. Kazantsev's book, Visitor from the Cosmos, and met with Dr. Kazantsev.
Мне попалась книжка Александра Петровича Казанцева «Гость из космоса».
He found that the riddle of Tunguska had not yet been solved.
С этого момента я заинтересовался этой проблемой.
Since then, he has been working on its solution.
Мы с ним много обсуждали, много говорили об этой проблеме, и я решил с этого момента, то есть 1959 года, посвятить свое время.
Here are recent slides of the site, taken by Dr. Zolotov on his recent expedition. The effects of the explosion still show on some trees.
Dr. Zolotov, I presume. Dr. Zolotov, I presume. Fishing. I know, stop it. Change the picture, please. I know. I know. Sometimes I think we've been on too many missions together.
Specialists to discuss effects of explosion on atmosphere.
One of the things we do at NASA Ames Research Center is to study how much environmental damage, if any, is caused by the launching of the space vehicles and rockets. The attention was drawn to the fact that any object, whether it is a comet or a meteor or a spaceship, coming into the Earth will heat the air and produce nitric oxide. This nitric oxide is the same as what you get from the tailpipe of your automobile. And we know precisely how much nitric oxide is produced when a given amount of heat is applied. All I did was apply the same theory to the Tunguska event, and I calculated the amount of nitric oxide produced to be some 20 million tons or more, which is equivalent to what the Mother Nature would have taken 35 years to make otherwise. Now, this nitric oxide obviously produced destroyed ozone layer, the Tunguska event produced some strange phenomena in the atmosphere, such as a bright night sky or darkness during the day. Now, eventually, nitric oxide becomes a fertilizer, and goes down to the ground and becomes a fertilizer, and trees grow fast. This is also observed in Siberia.
В районе Тунгусского взрыва наблюдаются интересные факты. Например,
Dr. Zolotov collected these tree slices for comparison. In this area, trees grow unusually fast since the explosion. This small slice is from a tree 150 years old, before the explosion. This slice is only 54 years old, but grown after the explosion.
I can't stand it anymore. I need some hard facts. I need information, scientifically sound evidence. You pessimist. You purposely steer me in the wrong direction, lead me on, get me to believe, then let me down with the effect of the explosion itself. And oft before tempestuous winds arise, the seeming stars fall headlong from the skies, and shooting through the darkness gild the night with sweeping glories and long trains of light. A comet.
Comet expert to follow.
The great Tunguska meteorite fall in Siberia in 1908 is one of the really exciting ones. And there was no sign of a crater, but there was an explosion which knocked trees down over an area 20 miles on the side and charred the trees. So this had to be a very diffuse body coming in and not an iron or a stony solid body. And I think there can be no doubt but what it was the remnant of a piece of a comet in which the ices probably had all vaporized, and you had this very fragile material you could crush in your fingers, and maybe it was as large as an office building coming in at something like 30 miles a second. Well, comets, as people see them, are objects on the sky. They move with respect to the stars, but very slowly, not quickly like a meteor which goes flashing across the sky. And they move in very elongated orbits about the sun, the tail always pointing away from the sun as they move around. Some of them have short periods of a few years, and others will never come back at all or go off to infinity. Now, comets are the greatest fakers in the solar system because they're really very small bodies of dirty ice, maybe a mile, maybe 5 miles in diameter, and the action takes place when they get close to the sun. The sun's heat vaporizes the ices and dust, carries them away from the comet, and that makes a cloud around the comet, which we call the coma, and that's lighted by sunlight and gives you the hazy object you see in space. And then the tail is formed by the solar wind blowing ions back from the sun, and that's the phenomenon. Comets have always been signs of ill omen throughout all of history. One of the most notable cases I think everyone knows is the time of the Battle of Hastings and the Bayeux Tapestry, in which there's a very fine picture of the comet, which happened to be Halley's, by the way. One of the most interesting is Napoleon, who was born at the time of Halley's comet in 1759. In 1811, there was a very great comet. And at that time, he was in Moscow, and he was one of those who believed that comets bring good luck. But as the record shows, it didn't help him very much in Moscow.
Comets have always fascinated painters everywhere.
Even if the Tunguska event was caused by a comet, and if such comet approached the Earth right now, we wouldn't be able to detect, because comets of that size and that nature is very hard to find.
I wonder what would happen. Sorry. I wonder what would happen if there were a recurrence of the Tunguska explosion on Earth today, with all of their new technology, huh?
It would set off doomsday effect, the war to end all wars.
Doomsday?
When it comes, we have no defense.
From about 1948 till the early 60s, I was somewhat perturbed by the possibility that a comet or a meteorite of large size might strike the Earth and be interpreted as a nuclear explosion and cause a nuclear war. But by the 1960s, I was relaxed because our radar surveillance systems are so good, and I'm sure the Russians have equal ones, that they could trace the path of the body coming in and be certain that it came from outer space.
Summations, conclusions.
I'm often asked about the great Tunguska incident, which I think is not difficult to explain. It was simply an oversized fireball representing either a small comet or a stony meteorite.
So I think at the moment we have to settle that it is a comet, most likely.
It's certainly easier to believe the comet theory than the UFO theory.
It's easier for me to think of the Tunguska chunk as a piece of an older comet that is already a cloud of gravel as it rounds the sun and hits and moves past the Earth.
And so I think it had to be a dead comet and probably a piece of Encke's.
The evidence up to the present clearly points to a small comet that collided with the Earth back in 1908.
That this object was actually a fragment of a very well-known comet, one of the ones that's been known for 150 years, and that's Comet Encke.
Type 1 carbonaceous chondrite.
Seems like it could have been a cometary body, and the evidence for that seems very strong, although I must admit that if we ran into a black hole today, a mini black hole, we would still have the same thing happen because the physical phenomena would still be the same.
Scientists have a habit of saying things are impossible and then proving that they are possible after all.
Carry the 4. Drat.
True science teaches, above all, to doubt and to be ignorant. Homer, we are doing well.
Doubt, my dear friend, begins only at the last frontier of what is possible. You are impossible. Let us review. Meteorite, stony nickel, no evidence. Meteorite, carbonaceous chondrite, possible. Natural nuclear explosion, unlikely. Comet, possible. Mini black hole, no evidence. Antimatter, insufficient evidence. Alien nuclear explosion, no proof. Unexplored theory. Why not? Feel better? I think that's all you really needed. Now, where was I? Yes. Thomas Jefferson once said, "Why, it's easier to believe that a Yankee would tell a lie than to believe that a stone would fall from the sky." I can't believe he said that. So, when things fell into Earth's gravity, from the very beginning of man's reign, he began to look up to the heavens, to get closer to what was beyond his reach, closer to what appeared to be the source of life.
At first, man tried just to defy gravity. Then later, he wanted more. In little more than half a century, he has gone up, 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 and out into space.
1958, a United States Navy Vanguard puts a 4-pound satellite in orbit. A new agency, NASA, is formed from the internationally respected National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. And the thrust into space seems now to be toward the moon. The Pioneer launches, a double series, one to circle the moon and the other to strike it. One by one, all 4 fail. The Soviet Union takes a commanding position, this time in manned orbital flight with the mission of Yuri Gagarin, April 12, 1961. 2 failures of unmanned test vehicles precede this flight. One burns up on re-entry into the atmosphere, and the other, on a signal to re-enter instead, goes into a higher orbit and is lost.
What does that have to do with the Siberian explosion?
Explanation to follow. Do not interrupt. Pay attention.
Made certain that this country rode the first waves of the Industrial Revolution, the first waves of modern invention, and the first wave of nuclear power. And this generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it.
Earthman has overcome gravity and made a giant step into space. What next?
February 3rd, 1966. Luna 9 makes a soft landing on the lunar surface, and Luna 10 orbits the moon, providing good photographs. December 26th. Luna 13 soft lands and reveals surface-bearing pressures.
And God called the dry land Earth.
1968.
And God saw
It
that
is
was
Christmas
good.
Day.
And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good Earth.
December 6, 1972. Eugene Cernan, veteran astronaut and commander of Apollo 17. He would be the last Apollo astronaut to stand on the surface of the moon. Dr. Harrison Schmitt, better known as Jack. he would be the first geologist to set foot on an alien world. Ronald Evans, command module pilot. He would remain in lunar orbit, operating a battery of experiments that would take this last close look at the moon. December 10th, 1972. America and Challenger went into orbit around the moon.
Houston, this is America. You can breathe easier. America has arrived on station for the challenge ahead.
The next day, December 11th, Cernan and Schmidt entered the lunar module and undocked. With the command module in the distance, they passed over their landing place.
I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry, merry month of December. Now, May's the month. May, that's right. May is the year of the month. Oh, what a nice day. Oh, funny, there's not a cloud in the sky, except in the earth. I think that'll stop the dust. It looks like a great place. Big blocks. It looks like quite a bit of variety from here. Different colors, anyway. Pretty hard, isn't it? That boulder's going to roll. Man, that is hard. Just don't stub your toe. No, dadgummit.
Jack Schmidt having a few problems.
The precious minutes had run out. Return to the rover, drive back to the Challenger, close out EVA-2.
We'd like you to leave immediately. Okay. My golly, this time goes fast. 99, proceeded, 3, 2, 1, ignition. Right away, Houston. Vector good. Ag thought.
Earthlings decide to cooperate in exploration of space. A big step forward. Cooperation unusual for species.
1 meter.
Contact. Capture. We also have capture.
Roger, Tom. We'll pass it on.
Soyuz and Apollo are shaking hands now. Houston, Apollo. Go ahead, Tom. Go greet the Professor Bushuyev at the Mayaki.
Tell Professor Bushuyev it was a soft docking.
Around the world, millions watch and listen as the two spacecraft become one. Now they wait for the next dramatic event, the meeting of Soviet and American crews.
All right, on a show. Открываю Luke 3. Okay, the camera. Ah! Здравствуйте! Got it? Yeah, it'll stay open.
Beneath its single striped parachute, Soyuz settles to Earth in Soviet Central Asia. Retro rockets cushion the impact. Three memorable years have ended. Alexei Leonov and Valery Kubasov have secured yet another place in the history of spaceflight.
You see, I know it's time for man to aspire to the stars. One of their philosophers, or as they call them down there, science fantasy writers, it's all the same. Anyway, Robert A. Heinlein said, "The earth is too small a basket for the human race to put all its eggs in." I wonder if the Philosopher's Stone could have been a meteorite. I know this is what intrigues me. In this new age for mankind, with all of his new expertise, what does he think of the possibility of life elsewhere in the universe?
Which universe? Information requested needs clarification. Cannot give human case for evidence of life in other universe without knowing to which one you refer.
I've had it with you. Be serious. I will rephrase. Make it man's case for life elsewhere.
It is now okay to talk about life elsewhere or intelligent life elsewhere, whereas a decade or two ago it wasn't okay.
It is conceivable that a spherical ship will land in front of the Washington Monument and a figure with 4 antennas and otherwise looking like the professional football player will walk out and demand to see our leader. But I hope very much that the universe of circumstance is wider than the rather shoddy imaginations of science fiction writers for 30 or 40 years. And I'm pretty convinced it is. We've not found their guidance so great in any but the most modest activities, like going to the moon, which is not very much.
I think there's no question but that we live in an inhabited universe that has life all over it.
I'm trying to prepare a few brief remarks on this. I came upon a comment by Thomas Carlyle, somewhat crusty old fellow, who upon thinking about the stars said, "A sad spectacle. If they be inhabited, what a scope for misery and folly. If they be not inhabited, what a waste of space." But in the remote contingency that there are interstellar spacefaring societies which might someday pick up this derelict, no longer radioing, we thought we would put a message on it to indicate a little bit of where we are, when we are, and who we are. We think that the information on where we are and when we are, indicated in this part of the message by the configuration of certain cosmic objects called pulsars, will be completely obvious to any society capable of traveling between the stars. These two objects will be more mysterious because it is unlikely that there will be human beings anywhere else, even though there may be other creatures elsewhere. And the plaque has served a very useful purpose in making us think about what sort of impression we might wish to give to the cosmos.
We have got to move into space, or we're going to wind up letting this civilization slide into the muck. And it seems unlikely that it could rise in the next 1,000 years. We've run out of the resources it would need.
Early part of this century, the United States put between 4 and 5% of its national budget into a major project. The Panama Canal, and I don't think anybody can say that we didn't make money out of it or that we didn't do good for the rest of the world. It was a classic case of doing well by doing good. For the same kind of money, 4 to 5% of the national budget over the next 20 years, we could end the energy problem in this country forever. We could build solar power satellites that are like dams in space that would run forever. And in general, we could begin the process that turns the Earth into a park and gets the messy stuff out there where it belongs and not down here where we have to live with it. But we have to do it, because if this generation doesn't do it, I'm not sure the next will have the resources.
What is the substance of a dream? I wish that I were home again.
Earthlings begin to believe in life elsewhere, listening and looking for signals from outer space. They consider that the Tunguska event had been caused by an alien ship. Kazantsev could have been right. Dr. Frank Drake, director of the largest radio telescope, talks about UFOs.
When you talk about UFOs and the possibility that these are spacecraft from other civilizations, you have to sit back and take a real look at the makeup of our universe. The separation of the stars is enormous, and this immensity, the enormity of space, creates in a way a cosmic quarantine. We've long since decided that the best place to search for other civilizations is in the radio spectrum, to search for their radio signals. Radio waves travel at the speed of light, they carry information, they tell you what we want to know.
It is tantalizing to think that right now, like an unheard whisper, radio transmissions from other intelligent life in space may be falling into the valley of the Arecibo reflector. Messages that could be heard if their direction and frequency were known.
In this universe, you cannot rule out anything.
Homer, Earthlings have understood. Cosmic quarantine can be broken with technology. In time.
Have you no loyalty? The frog started it all, you know. All right. If you won't tell me, once upon all time, in the pastel days at the pool, life was beautiful for the dragonfly larvae living at the bottom of the pond. It was transparent and delightful. The days passed sweetly. Life was, well, it just was. Then one day, it was rumored by a frog. The day would come, he said, when the larvae would emerge from the pond and never to return. Now, the larvae had heard of a change followed by a period of sleep, but none could believe that the day would come when they wouldn't live at the bottom of the pond. There was trouble in paradise. None could rest. Then one larvae said to another, "Promise to return and tell, regardless of our fate."
Homer, the moral of the story is that even two stages of the same life cannot communicate with itself after the change. What will we become? Larry Niven and Jerry Purnell, authors of Lucifer's Hammer, discuss aerodynamics of an icy comet having caused the Tunguska explosion.
Well, Lucifer's Hammer, we used a new comet, and a very big one, had it break up into chunks, have a fairly large number of fairly large chunks hit the Earth. There's really nothing wrong with thinking of the Tunguska thing as a fairly new comet that broke up, and you got a smaller chunk that hit and nothing else did. This thing is almost certainly ice, since they didn't find any pieces of it left. And if it's almost certainly ice, that argues that it hasn't taken the trip around the sun very often, because if it does, it's used up the ices. I like the idea anyway, because it isn't just water ice. It fairly obviously had some other volatiles in it. You got the changes in course as it moved along, right? And that's fairly obviously both aerodynamic shaping of the as it comes in, or at least that certainly explains it. If I have something coming in and pieces are melting off of it, it can create a new aerodynamic surface and cause it to change course.
According to your calculations, the fireball made a turn. The fireball made a turn. What could cause a natural body to do such a thing? Unless...
Speed and trajectory of fireball indicate definite possibility of damaged space probe. Origin unknown. Speed and trajectory of fireball indicate definite possibility of damaged space probe. Origin unknown. Speed and trajectory of fireball indicate definite possibility of damaged space probe. Origin unknown.
Base probe. Target Earth. Target Earth. Target